And the 7:30 view in the morning. Look at how the air highlights those trees along that ridge. This, I think, borders on a gorgeous day since there's so much blue sky. And a telephoto version. And somewhere up on one of those ridge lines is where Robbie Burns died, the Scottish poet, when his horse threw him. And in a few moments, you'll see coming in on the right side a white house. The house that was there, and that may still be a part of it, was actually hit during the Second World War by a Lancaster bomber that was crippled, making its way to the airport to our far right. And there being no other houses in the entire area, apparently, the Lancaster hit that house. The crew members were all killed, unfortunately, but one more Second World War story for England. And now for my third day of walking, I leave Sandysike, farmhouse and bunkhouse and B&B, and progress to the east. Downhill from the farmhouse is a family of, or herd of pheasants takes off across the landscape. And this is the entrance you encounter coming from the east to the west, but we continue on this way. Lovely stone bridge across this pretty woodland stream. And those folks were people from England who were also doing this trip, stayed at the bed and breakfast. There in the distance, the church in Walton, first little town up from Sandysike's. Just a pan of this much more hilly country that we're getting into as we approach Banks, the little town of Banks. And up here we should find some boundary markers that are of Roman wall origin. So here's the first section of actual Roman wall that I've seen. There'll be more as I travel eastward. There's been none to the west. Looking at it from the end, it even appears that a great measure of it has been taken away, stolen, nicked, as they'd say here, for other purposes. But this was, for some reason, the section left as a boundary marker. There you can see we're getting a pretty good slope on the hills now. Some people going back the way I've come towards the west. Now, a chap I was speaking to a moment ago behind me on the trail, who lives here, named David, whose wife is Fiona, works at Birds of Wald Museum, said that right here on, I think, this next little bench that we're coming to, maybe 50 yards up, was a small fort, and that, of course, here where this hedgerow is was the Roman wall. But you notice some kind of remains of a structure there. Whether it was Roman or just made of Roman stones, which is more likely, I don't know, but it could be associated with that fort he was talking about. Now, panning across the wall line, or this hedgerow, you can see running right up here what appears to be the ditch. It's certainly distinctive. It looks man-made. Over here was the vallum. To the right is the south. And we'll walk over there a little bit later and look down into it. There's a signpost over there on that tree that we'll read in a moment, but he seemed to indicate that it was on this rise right here that the fort was, but that depression there ran down to the vallum, which would have run along parallel to the wall that way. I don't think I'll walk over there, but what's interesting, and don't know what it is, I can see some white posts, and I don't know if those are for some other purpose or whether they were archaeologists post trying to delineate the vallum or something along that line. But this view will give you an idea of what the Roman soldier saw. And remember that he was a Roman soldier and a ditch digger, big ditch. The ditch behind me and the vallum. And I think it's very safe to say that this wall that's right along the hedgerow is in fact the stones of Hadrian's wall, as are the buildings that are along here. Natural, it's done all over the world. Even in Kotor, Montenegro, there was recent evidence of somebody stealing the paving stones on the road that went back up behind the castle, which to me is a modern day historical atrocity. Time for a slow 270-degree pan. I'm moving from a view to the east to the north now, swinging up towards the north. And to the west, where we've come. And back around for a 360 pan east.
SPP carved on the northern side. Yeah.
Okay, we're at Hadrian's Wall, Hare Hill, and this is my first substantial chunk of the wall unrestored. And a couple of ladies told me that the bed and breakfast I wanted to stay in is jammed up tonight, probably. This is a trail that goes along the side of the road, just to give you some separation from people. And a magnificent view. We pan up to it. Some little town across that valley. And then here, a section of the wall that's been preserved. Presumably this is a mile castle. We'll see in just a moment. This is actually Bank's East Turret 52A, and turrets were put halfway, two of them were put in between the castles. The castles were built 1 Roman mile apart. It's 1.37 kilometers, I think, apart. And here it's pretty clear how it was constructed. It looks like the finished stones, of course, finished the outside, and then the core of the buildings and the walls were of larger stone that looks like in a matrix of some kind of cement, which the Romans had, of course. And we can only imagine how this was used. This interpretive sign tells us in about 1 mile east of here we can follow the line of Hadrian's Wall to Sandysike turret 51A. Visit 3 remains of turrets and a signal tower. And looking somewhat eastward, I'll just pan across this beautiful view as I start to walk away from that signal post. Where exactly they were signaling, I'm not sure. Of course, the purpose of signaling was to bring, to amass troops when there was a threat at a certain point. Okay, where we just were is Pike Hill Signal Tower, and since I'm moving from left to right, from west to east, I've just gotten off that little path that was on the other side of the wall from the road, and now I'm back on the road, and presumably in a couple of more feet we'll be back off the road again to the left, it looks like. And we should be able to see turn 51B there too, and the remains of the ditch. And then a little bit further, Sandysike turned.